James had lived alone on the frontier colony of New Terra for 3 years, and he preferred it that way. The outpost station on the edge of human-controlled space attracted few visitors, and that suited him fine. So when the desperate knocking came at 0300 hours during the worst ice storm of the season, his first instinct was suspicion. He checked the external monitor. A figure huddled against his door, barely visible through the howling white chaos. Outside, small, shivering. Definitely not human. The silhouette showed elongated limbs and a cranial structure, unlike any Terran species. James grabbed his plasma pistol and cautiously opened the door. She nearly collapsed into his arms. Her skin was a pale lavender, marked with darker purple patterns that pulsed weakly. Ice crystals clung to what appeared to be thin membrane-like clothing, wholly inadequate for New Terra's brutal climate. Her large dark eyes met his for just a moment before she crumpled. Any other species in the galaxy would have hesitated. The Xanthari would have consulted their clan elders. The Vrex would have filed an official request for assistance. The Krell would have simply closed the door. Outsiders were outsiders. And resources were finite. James caught her before she hit the ground. All right, I've got you," he muttered, kicking the door shut against the shrieking wind. He carried her to the thermal mat near his heating unit and wrapped her in every blanket he owned. She weighed almost nothing, her frame bird-delicate and trembling violently. Over the next hour, James worked with quiet efficiency. He raised the habitat's internal temperature to uncomfortable levels for himself, but necessary for her survival. He prepared warm broth from his rations, holding the cup to her lips when her hands proved too weak. He didn't ask questions. He didn't demand explanations. He simply helped. When she finally spoke, her voice was like wind chimes in a breeze. "Why?" "Help, I am nothing to you." James shrugged, adjusting another blanket around her shoulders. "You were freezing. What else was I supposed to do?" Her eyes widened with incomprehension. In her experience across a dozen worlds, kindness came with contracts, with debts, with obligations carefully measured and recorded. Her own people, the Azareth, had taught her that survival was transaction-based. One did not give without expectation of return. Yet this human had asked nothing. Over the following days, Jessica, as she asked him to call her, adopting a human name with tentative hope, slowly regained her strength. James learned her story in fragments. She had been a translator aboard a merchant vessel that abandoned her when she became ill. Too expensive to treat, too insignificant to matter. They had left her at the nearest port with nothing. She had wandered, trading the last of her possessions for passage to progressively cheaper locations until she had nothing left. New Terra had been her final stop. "I thought I would die here," she admitted one evening as they shared a meal. "I had accepted it." James frowned, stirring his coffee. "That's a pretty bleak way to think. It is reality. The galaxy is not kind to those without value." "Maybe," James said, "but you don't stop being a person just because you're down on your luck." This concept was foreign to her. In Azareth society, worth was measured in contribution. In Xanthari culture, value came from lineage. Among the Vrex, purpose was assigned by the collective. But humans, strange, unpredictable humans, seemed to operate on different principles altogether. She observed him carefully over the weeks. He never asked her to repay him. He shared his food without tallying the cost. He taught her to manage the habitat systems, to operate the communication array, to repair the solar collectors, not as payment but simply because, as he said, you might as well learn something useful. When a merchant ship finally arrived at the outpost, Jessica prepared to leave. She had made contact with a distant cousin who agreed to send passage fees. She stood at the door, her small pack containing everything James had given her: warm clothes, rations, a datapad with saved credits he had transferred without ceremony. "I cannot repay this debt," she said, the words heavy with cultural shame. James looked genuinely confused. "What debt?" "You saved my life, housed me, fed me, taught me. I have nothing to—" "Jessica," he interrupted gently, "there is no debt. You needed help. I could help. That's it. That's the whole equation." She stared at him, this human who defied everything she understood about the universe. "Why are your people like this?" James considered the question, then smiled. "We're not all like this. But I guess we've been on the losing end before. Most of us at some point. Maybe that's why we remember what it's like to need someone to open a door during a storm. Jessica departed that afternoon, but the encounter rippled outward in ways neither could anticipate. She spoke of it, carefully at first, then with growing confidence. The human who asked nothing. The human who gave freely. The human who valued life over transaction. In a galaxy built on contracts and calculated exchanges, the story spread like wildfire. It was absurd. It was illogical. It was impossible. It was human. And slowly others began to wonder, what if that way of thinking wasn't weakness at all? What if it was a different kind of strength? The kind that built communities instead of hierarchies, that created loyalty through genuine care rather than obligation, that measured worth in inherent dignity rather than marketable skills. James never learned about the quiet revolution his simple kindness sparked. He continued living in his frontier outpost, occasionally helping stranded travelers, fixing equipment, watching the stars. Just a human, doing what came naturally, seeing someone in need and opening the door. Because that's what humans did. Not all of them, not always, but often enough that the galaxy was beginning to notice. Often enough that it made a difference.